Story 1, more sad than disturbing. My uncle was almost my aunt. He was born in the late 1940s with no testicles, no vagina, and an enlarged clitoris or nub, which they discussed removing but thankfully left alone. The doctor sent him home telling my grandmother, "Congratulations on your little girl." She already had 3 older sons under 5, so she was pleased. My uncle spent the first 3 to 4 years of his life being treated and dressed like a little girl, ribbons in his hair and all, though he would ditch them in the yard so he could play rough and tumble, climb trees, and wrestle with his brothers. When he was around 4 years old, his testicles descended, but his penis stayed a nub. He later married but was never able to have children. No one talks about it. He was my favorite uncle, he was so cool. Rest in peace, uncle. Story 2. A teacher of the year in one of the states in the past 2 years was the biggest drug dealer during high school, then became one of the biggest at our college and almost 2 decades later still is. Story 3. My coworker's entire degree is fake. He edited the diploma, and no one ever checked. Story 4. I found my neighbor's Reddit account, and now I know way too much about his marriage. They present themselves as a perfect couple, but now I know they are not. If she knew what he was saying on Reddit, I think that would be the last straw. Story 5. I know someone who was an accomplice in a murder. One person was prosecuted, but this individual was not. My assumption is that he is or was an informant, but I do not know this as a fact. Story 6. A coworker has a second family 2 states away. Neither family knows about the other. Story 7. My father almost died from alcohol abuse-induced sepsis a few years ago, and we moved him out of his home into an assisted living center. All of his belongings ended up in my garage in boxes. My mom divorced him 15 years ago because she found paperwork from when he was in rehabilitation, and on one of the worksheets, he admitted to having extramarital affairs throughout their 30-year marriage. Recently, I've been going through everything and discarding what is expired or no longer needed. I found more worksheets from the same period in rehabilitation, including one detailing all of his sexual encounters. This is difficult enough information to read about your father, but it turns out he had an affair with my mom's best friend Karen, who has been her best friend since kindergarten, was the maid of honor at their wedding, and is still my mom's best friend today. My mom does not know. It would shatter her, and she is a tender-hearted, saintly woman. I have been wrestling with whether or not I should tell her. I also found needles and vials of naloxone with a flyer explaining how to use it in case someone is overdosing from opioids or heroin. 5 out of the 6 vials had been used. I had no idea that the whole time he was in and out of rehabilitation and claiming to be sober, he was using heroin, let alone overdosing that many times. My brother has enough on his plate right now, so I am keeping this information to myself for now. Story 8. My brother molested me as a child. I never spoke of it because it would have devastated my parents. His life was difficult as an adult. He died a lonely alcoholic. I have thrived. Story 9. My best friend fell in love with and actively tried to seduce her biological father. She kissed him when he was drunk. Despite being a jobless drug addict, he was the one who had to go no contact after she would not let it go. For context, she was adopted as a baby and met her parents for the first time at 18. Apparently, it is not uncommon for family members who were not raised together. Her adopted father also had the emotional capacity of a stump, and she was still reeling from being raped in high school. She graduated and currently has a successful career, children, and a wonderful husband who I am pretty sure has no idea. Story 10. I know a man, honestly the nicest person I have ever met, who, over 40 years ago, knew a woman he described as the sister he never had. She was violently beaten and raped by a mutual acquaintance. She told the authorities she did not know who it was and did not pursue prosecution. My friend was the only person she confided in about what happened. He said he went to confront the man with the intent of telling him he needed to turn himself in, or there would be consequences. The man told him to leave him alone and said the woman had asked for it, calling her derogatory names. Something inside my friend snapped, and he beat the man to death with his bare hands. He said he was never a suspect and that the police thought it was a random incident. When the woman asked him about it, he told her he wished it had been him, but he did not do it. He claims I am the only person he has ever told this to. He rarely thinks about it now, and when he does, he feels no regret or remorse. Story 11. A neighbor traveled abroad for work. When he returned, and while exchanging the usual fake neighborly banter, he was showing me pictures. As he scrolled, I noticed the same girl in many photos he said was a coworker. Then pictures appeared showing her undressing. He nervously laughed and quickly scrolled past. He is married with children. Story 12. I am gay, and my homophobic father is leaving most of his property and money to my nephew because, as Dad says, at least he will carry on the family name. Dad does not know that my nephew is also gay. Story 13. My stepbrother and his wife surrendered their only child at a fire station because the baby had a disability. They told everyone they had a stillbirth. In reality, they did not want to raise a child with special needs. As far as my father and his wife know, they do not have any grandchildren from their marriage. However, somewhere in the system, I have a step nibbling with Down syndrome. This happened in the United States. There are safe haven laws which vary by state. These laws allow parents to safely surrender an infant at a hospital, fire station, or police station within a certain time frame, usually 30 days. Similar laws exist in other countries. Story 14. A hookup who I got into a regular relationship with ended up telling me, just by talking about our lives, that his stepbrother and a couple of friends used to torture and sexually assault him. It was brutal, but he was generally past it and okay. By high school, his mom and stepdad had broken up, and he said he never saw his stepbrother much after that. Much later, I found out, totally by accident, that I knew his stepbrother fairly well. A local business and community figure, very conservative, but he and I got along well. He said, "Well, now you know who he is. He's since made amends, we're good. But now I know this guy, admittedly at a tough time in his life when he was physically abused by his father, was raping his stepbrother. It's such a weird spot to be in. Fortunately, I don't have to interact with him much, but it's a small town, so we run into each other. He's surely noticed I'm not as friendly towards him. I doubt he knows he makes me physically ill. I understand there are serious factors involved, and it's not my place at all. But it also sucks. I'd honestly prefer to have never known." Story 15. I work as an emergency room nurse. My friend's uncle has a tough personality and some underlying medical conditions. He was rushed to the hospital for what was believed to be one of his known medical issues. My friend asked me to check on him. He was there for a foreign object stuck in his rectum and ultimately needed surgery. The family still believes it was just a sporadic gastrointestinal emergency. I will keep the truth confidential. Story 16. When I was 12, I discovered my married uncle was gay. He had a wife and 2 sons, but was a closeted gay man who grew up in the 1940s. My father used to walk him to school to protect him from being picked on. I never said a word to anyone. Both he and my aunt have since passed, and it serves no purpose to share this information now. Story 17. My mother-in-law was raped by her father starting around age 8 and continuing through her teenage years. Her mother blamed her and was abusive towards her. I am the only person who knows. My mother-in-law eventually cared for her mother until she passed away recently. Their entire family thinks these people are perfect. It is hard knowing something like that and having to pretend to like the lady. Story 18. My father intentionally committed vehicular manslaughter in the area separating the borders of Thailand and Malaysia. He accelerated our BMW 7 Series V8 when someone attempted to overtake us as we saw a truck coming in the opposite direction. My sister and I watched through the rear window as the overtaking vehicle suddenly became boxed in, hit the brakes, fishtailed, and flipped multiple times into a large monsoon drain at the side of the road. We both screamed for him to stop and help, but my father, a military officer, continued to accelerate until we arrived at the border crossing into Malaysia. As children, my sister and I did not understand why he would not stop. Many years later, he admitted to intentionally attempting to kill the occupants of that car because he wanted to know what it felt like to kill somebody. I have not talked to him in 10 years. Story 19. I am pretty sure an old pharmacist boss of mine was smoking methamphetamine around 2017 to 2018, but there is no way to prove it. I just smelled it on him. Maybe he just cooked it. I do know his parents were well off and he had veneers on his teeth. To explain, I know the smell because an ex-partner of mine smoked methamphetamine years before that. We obviously did not work out. It is a very distinct smell. Story 20. My ex's father was the person of interest in 2 separate murder cases, and I am sure he did it. The man and his son are evil. I have no evidence except the way they acted in private and a few things he would let slip while intoxicated. Story 21. Over 35 years ago, I had a friend in Spain. He was Irish and was smuggled out of Ireland into Spain to hide from his crimes. He sent a car with a bomb into a military checkpoint, killing British soldiers. Another time, his car was found with bodies in the trunk. That was when he fled. He told me this about a year after I met him. He shared stories from his childhood. British soldiers broke down his front door and struck his mother's face with rifle butts. His brother was shot and killed by the British military. I never told anyone until years later. Now, it is just a story from my travel experiences that I share with other Canadians. I wonder if he is still hiding on Ibiza. Story 22. It technically cannot ruin her life anymore since she is no longer alive, but my grandmother killed 2 husbands. She was a single mother to about 9 children, along with a few grandchildren and unrelated children. The eldest child was permanently disabled and entirely reliant on my grandmother, so her going to jail would have seriously harmed her whole family. Now that she is deceased, I can share how she dug shallow graves for 2 pedophiles. I made sure they would never hurt anyone again. Stuck with me. Edit. It is concerning that multiple people are defending pedophiles without asking for any clarification. Both pedophiles had more than one victim, and the second one openly bragged about how he would continue to molest because he thought my grandmother could not do anything about it. I hope that answers the questions you refused to ask. Story 23. I know someone who committed murder and did not get caught. I know a sexual offender who was never reported. I knew a child molester, and I ruined his life by exposing him. Story 24. I'm not sure if this counts, but it's a great story. In the 1990s, Montana had a governor named Judy Martz. She was a real ditz, but she loved to celebrate her Irish heritage. When St. Patrick's Day came around one year, a friend of mine who was involved with the ancient order of the Royal Hibernians was tasked with creating a document for the governor to sign. This document celebrated Irish heritage throughout Montana and highlighted how proud Butte was of it. My friend made a very formal-looking document, with calligraphy and beautiful writing throughout. The writing was somewhat verbose, so the tendency was to read it lightly. However, buried in the text was a clause stating something like, I, the duly elected governor of the great state of Montana, hereby grant a perpetual pardon for any and all offenses, past or in the future, committed by, and my friend's name was there. Governor Martz signed the proclamation, and my friend still has a copy of it. He has not had to use it yet. Story 25. My sister-in-law was assaulted when she was young and told my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law responded with, "We all have to lose our virginity," or something extremely rude to my young sister-in-law. My sister-in-law disclosed this to me 3 years ago. My husband adores his mother, and I am sworn to secrecy not to tell him. My dream is to whisper in my mother-in-law's ear when she is dying, "You were a terrible mother to say that to your daughter. That would deeply affect her." Story 26. My uncle cheated on my aunt, and she has been putting money aside ever since in case he does it again. Every time he has been on a work trip since, she has been anxious because she does not trust him. My cousins do not know, and it would ruin their lives. Story 27. When I was born, my mother told my father that under no circumstances was I ever to be in the presence of his father. When I was 4, he took me to a family reunion. His father was there. That is not the secret, though. Everyone found out about it. The secret is they literally never spoke of what happened to me afterward, thinking I would forget. I did not. Story 28. My parent, who is a member of the clergy, believes that they hear the voice of God speaking to them directly. They also lead a very different life behind the scenes than they do in public. Ask the 3 children about the abuse we have suffered. Story 29. Not necessarily disturbing, but a secret nonetheless. A few years ago, my dad needed help with his laptop. Somehow the display cable inside came loose. Not a problem, easy fix. When I turned it back on and loaded Windows just to make sure everything was working, I was met with a window showing his Gmail sent messages. Every single one was him responding to men seeking men Craigslist ads. This was about a year after my mom died. They had been married for 35 years and, as far back as I could remember, it was a pretty loveless marriage. I just closed the window, ran Windows Update, and told him everything was good to go. It's something I've only ever told my fiancé, and I don't plan on ever bringing it up in a conversation with my dad. He knows I'd be open and accepting. Both of my kids are part of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, and I'm not bothered at all, but I didn't think it was my place to initiate that conversation. Story 30. My cousin repeatedly tried to have sex with me, not physically, but by attempting to bribe and beg. He passed away a couple of years ago in his mid-20s, so it was a huge shock. I am not going to ruin his life by speaking about it now, as it would destroy his mother. Story 31. I was in the service with a guy who got caught with a pound of heroin. Somehow, heaven only knows how, he cut a deal with the state police to re-enlist for 6 years and return to the Republic of Vietnam. He spilled the beans when we were drinking one night. What a gift he got. Of course, he would have been out of the service if this was known. Story 32. My best friend married a man who has 5 brothers and 1 sister. The sister is the oldest, in her late 40s or maybe 50s, and she confided in my friend that their father sexually assaulted her when she was a teenager. She asked my friend to promise not to reveal the secret, otherwise she would deny. She feels she needs to protect her brothers, who would probably want to harm their father if they knew the truth. So the sister carries this burden to protect her brother's feelings about their father. And now my best friend carries the knowledge as well. The mother knows everything and stays with the father. Story 33. My friend talks about her husband being homophobic when they met, and that he has become more tolerant and accepting over the years after meeting her lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender friends and seeing they are just regular people. Her husband had a sexual encounter with my openly bisexual husband before she and her husband met. I found out after they got married and obviously cannot tell her without causing serious problems. She has no idea. Her husband should have been honest from the beginning. I do not think him having experiences with men would upset her, but the deceit would. Story 34. My boss went to prison for child pornography. Everyone thought he was on stress leave. Whether it would ruin his life or not, I don't care. But if anything happened to the company if it came out, it would affect all of the employees and their families. This is what haunts me. Story 35. My mom's ex-boyfriend almost murdered my mother in front of me when I was 5. My parents were in the early stages of separation or divorce at that time. I'm not sure. My mom and I were living with this man who also had an older son that visited, but I didn't know him well. One day, while I was watching TV in the living room sitting cross-legged on the floor, my mom and her boyfriend got into a nasty fight in the kitchen, which was about 10 feet away. My mom started yelling for me, and I looked over to see that the boyfriend had my mom pinned with her back against the countertop in cabinets. He was holding a giant knife to her chest and yelling in her face. She told me to go get help, so I ran to try to open the door, but I was having trouble with the top deadlock. It just wouldn't budge. I was panicking because I knew if I didn't get out the door to get help from a neighbor, I was going to witness my mom being stabbed to death. I don't know why she didn't tell me to call emergency services or why I didn't think of that either. I finally got the door open and started running down the breezeway to the next apartment when I was snatched from behind. It was my mother. He had apparently let her go, maybe realizing he was in trouble if I had made it to the neighbor's door. My mom didn't call the police. I don't remember what happened after that. I do remember that one day my mom suddenly asked me if I wanted to go live with my father again, and I was overjoyed. She had put me through a lot during the year-long separation period, moving us in with 2 different boyfriends I barely knew and forcing me to lie to my dad about where we lived. I don't know if she ever told him or if he knows what the ex-boyfriend did to her in front of me, but they are still together to this day. Unfortunately, I still have nightmares reliving that memory where my mom is being attacked with a knife and I have to try to save her. We do not talk about it because my mom would completely deny it even happened, and I'm not about to debate that with her. Ever. Story 36. I knew a girl who told me in private one day that she stopped her birth control on purpose, without anyone knowing, so she could get pregnant and trap her partner. Now she tells everyone the pregnancy was a freak accident. I do not say anything mainly because no one would believe me. Story 37. I have an associate who is a significant drug dealer. He is already on probation for possession and, if caught, would probably face 10 to 15 years in prison. He is 45 years old and has a stable job and career. Story 38. My vegetarian friend took me out for burgers. She ordered 1 chicken patty and 1 vegetable patty. The server mixed them up in front of us. She kept eating and complaining that her burger patty was very chewy today. She never had chicken, so she had no idea about the taste or texture. When I bit into mine, I knew I had the vegetable burger. By then, she had already taken a bite and swallowed it. I knew she would get very sick if I told her the truth, and she would be very upset. So I never said a word. It's been 14 years, and she still doesn't know she ate chicken that day. Story 39. My father-in-law cheated on my mother-in-law at my wedding. He continued, and I think he still might, to see her even after that and has given her money. My mother-in-law noticed the money going missing and questioned him about it. He denied it and gave an excuse. She knows a little but does not know that he actually cheated on her or that it was on his son's wedding night. Story 40. I had a sexual relationship with a woman who is now a notable presence in conservative state-level politics. She had some preferences that I am certain she would not want made public. They involved unconventional activities. She was also cheating on her closeted husband with me, which she would prefer to keep private. Story 41. A well-known, devout National Football League player who married his college sweetheart had a years-long affair with my former friend after he got married. He is still married and now has children. He was never caught. Story 42. I know a man who was exonerated through Project Innocence. He confessed to me that he actually committed the crime. This person regularly gives speeches about his time in prison and how it felt to be incarcerated for something he did not do. He also received a large settlement from the state. In summary, the prosecutor suppressed evidence, but only because the man was guilty. He is one of the most unpleasant individuals and is very proud of himself for everything. Story 43. My neighbor has been secretly paying the rent for the elderly lady next door for 3 years. He would be mortified if people knew because he has built his entire personality around being a grumpy curmudgeon. Story 44. I was at a concert a few years ago. I saw an old acquaintance beforehand who was attending with colleagues. During the concert, I saw him across the hall looking around to check if the coast was clear before kissing his colleague. He is married with 2 children, and his wife is the main breadwinner who supports all his whims. If she left him, he would be in trouble. Story 45. My mother is a famous author and has been horribly abusive to everyone in her life. She is a raging narcissist and control addict who takes vengeance on perceived enemies in any way she can. If you don't do what she says, you become an enemy. She reminds me of Donald Trump in the way she has treated me, my sibling, my father, and everyone else around her. She constantly attracts women with her fame and uses them as if they are cult members, doing everything for her. They are frequently exiled or cut out when they cross her, and then another woman moves up to become her new top friend, unpaid assistant, and target for emotional abuse. Her public persona, however, is loving, kind, and supportive of women. Whenever I tell people she is my mother, they say how much they love her books, and I keep my mouth shut beyond that. I have stopped telling people. Maybe after she is dead, I will write a memoir or create a video series to tell my story, but I do not dare risk her retribution while she is alive, so I will not say anything yet. Nothing is off the table if she feels you have wronged her. I have been on her bad side before, and she put me through literal hell the last time I stood up to her. Now I know it is better to stay silent and keep my distance. Story 46. My sister-in-law's husband groomed and slept with a 16-year-old girl when he was 35. She was a gymnastics student of his wife's, and he helped out during classes. The victim became dependent on them for housing a few months later. My sister-in-law defends him because she believes he might be autistic and says that teenagers can be difficult. She tries to pretend everything is fine whenever we meet. My partner and I try to avoid her. Story 47. My grandfather killed Jewish people and stole their valuables after the Second World War was over in 1946 on Polish territory. My family knew it, my mother, my uncle, and my grandmother. They are both deceased now. Story 48. Someone I know killed a person who was abusing his sister's children. He said the man begged and pleaded for his life and promised to never harm another child again. And he never did. Story 49. You all are great at keeping secrets, but don't you think some of these lives should be ruined? Story 50. My childhood friend stalked and killed her assailant. She told me a few years after she did it. Story 51. My well-loved, goofy uncle murdered my crippled aunt and made it look like she asphyxiated on car exhaust in the garage after a fall. My dad, his brother, always believed him, and so did the whole side of the family. I never commented on her death, other than extending condolences to my cousins. I never talked to my uncle. One Thanksgiving, he and I made eye contact, and the look on his face was chilling. It was like he knew that I knew something, and I felt threatened. I never said anything to my dad because he worshipped his brother and would never have believed me. Everyone of that generation has died now. A few years ago, I mentioned our aunt's death to my brothers and was surprised to find out that they also believed our uncle killed her. I don't speak with our cousins much, but someday I know it will come up. Story 52. When I was younger, a mentally disabled woman who worked at my school as an aide in the class with my mom would tell us stories about her boyfriend. She started telling sexual stories and finally revealed that it was her high school-age cousin who told her to keep their relationship a secret. She had the body of a woman but the mind of a child. He is now a well-known politician in our state, and his entire platform is about being religious and serving God. I have asked my mom and sister, who support him, if they ever think about how he used and abused his disabled cousin. They say that God forgave him, so we should as well, and no one needs to know. I always want to tell people about it, but I worry no one will believe me, and anyone else who knows is not going to speak up. Story 53. Politician who did and does a lot of every drug imaginable is an alcoholic, gambler, very atheist, practically anti-theist, and a conservative churchgoer publicly. Not anyone remotely famous by any stretch of imagination. I am talking about a small town councilor, not an anti-lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning senator or congress member. They pretend to be religious when they are not because the locals are religious, no more than that. They are not American. Story 54. I know a girl who was a lifelong victim of her father's sexual abuse. He created dark web websites and made a large amount of money from exploiting her. She was his only victim. I know her name, her location, and even the online alias he created to exploit her. She has never been able to bring herself to report him, and I know she hasn't yet. Trust me, this would be breaking national news, and I keep my eye out for it, waiting for the day she is ready. His life would be ruined, and he would be in jail where he belongs, but so would hers. In an instant, her life would be changed. She wouldn't be herself anymore. She would become the victim, the survivor, and the life she built would become a footnote. She's not ready for that, and she doesn't deserve that. She worked hard to get out and become who she is. I would never betray her or do that to her. That is her decision for when she is ready. Since nobody wants to use common sense to consider why anyone would not immediately report this information while also feeling entitled regarding a stranger's trauma just to avoid acting unkind. I know this information because of strict medical privacy and confidentiality that allows her and others who share our stories to receive the treatment we need to truly live. This is her choice, as it is the choice of every other victim of assault. You do not have the right to violate them and silence their voice again just to feel morally superior. Story 55. I once found out my neighbor has a secret collection of garden gnomes dressed as famous historical figures. If that got out, they would be the laughingstock of the entire block. Story 56. I have a friend. We grew up together. She shared with me that some boys who also grew up with us assaulted her. I keep this to myself. She wrote about it in a book, but I am the only one who knows who they are. They live where my family still lives, and they are part of a community I am still in touch with. I cannot say anything. Story 57. It is not disturbing, but I let a kind person continue thinking I was interested in her husband instead of the other way around. They had gotten married, but I did not know about it. He did not tell me either. I still speak to her socially, but not to him anymore. Story 58. My husband is abusive, and I am doing everything I can to get a divorce. He has been preventing me at every turn. The police have come to my house 3 times, so it is not a secret. However, most of our closest friends and family live in other states, 5 to 10 hours away. Our neighbors see the police lights, but our parents, siblings, and close friends have little to no idea what my life is like or how hard I have been protecting his reputation so that he can keep his job. Story 59. A nurse once admitted that she gives people who are at the end of their life and in excruciating pain more pain medication when they ask, even if it is enough to kill them. She never deliberately euthanized anyone but really does not believe someone should have to spend the last days of their life in severe pain. Story 60. Someone who pretends to be vegan but eats meat and eggs during vacations. He also lectures people about the benefits of veganism and the harmful effects of eating meat. Story 61. My 26-year-old high school teacher, who is now a principal and who guided me in 9th grade, sometimes makes me wonder what would happen to him now if I told anyone. Story 62. 2 words. Teachers' convention. I have never seen such a lack of decency, morals, and self-respect as I have during the bar night of teachers' convention. I say this as an observer. Old teachers connecting with new hires. Married? It doesn't matter on this night. Gay? Straight? It doesn't matter at teachers' convention. Seriously, you would not believe the behavior of your kids' teachers after hours. Story 63. I know an executive director who is having an inappropriate relationship with his secretary and misappropriating the company's money, but I have not reported it to his wife or the authorities yet. Story 64. My ex-wife has been unfaithful to her new husband multiple times, and their child together may not be his. I remain silent because we share equal custody of my daughter, and I do not want to disrupt the other half of her life. Story 65. My great-great-great-grandmother killed a government official because he tried to take away my grandpa and his siblings. He lied and said my grandpa's parents had signed over official documents, and that my grandpa and his siblings, all 21 of them who were still alive, would be taken to residential schools. Granny didn't like that, pulled out her gun, and shot the official in the face. Because she lived on the reservation, she wasn't charged with murder. And yes, that says 21. My grandpa is the oldest of 22 kids. The youngest died at 6 months old when my grandpa was in his 20s. Story 66. Me scrolling through looking for the best, juiciest secrets. Story 67. I know for a fact that a close relative struggles with pedophilia, and they know that I know. I haven't taken any action because there is no reason to believe they are committing any crimes at the moment. As far as I can tell, they have the affliction under control and have found acceptable, though not ideal, alternatives to committing child sexual abuse. They are not in any situations or environments where they have much opportunity to do so by deliberate choice. I have kept the secret because if people knew, they would be shunned and outcast even more than they willingly inflict on themselves. Story 68. They accidentally killed the family dog by forgetting the dog in the car in the driveway on a hot day. Only a few close friends know how the dog actually died. Leaving a dog in a hot car is a chargeable offense where they live, but it happened at their home, so police or animal control were never called. The person is devastated and has a wife and baby, so no one who knows ever reported it. The wife does know. She was heavily depressed afterward, and they are still together, but the marriage is not doing well. Story 69. I briefly dated a man whose family owns a well-established local jewelry store. One day, he told me his grandparents, the founders, immigrated here after World War II but were originally from Germany. When I asked what they did, he said one was a doctor and one was a scientist, I think. Later, I went to his father's house with him to feed the dogs while his father and stepmother were out of town, and there was a whole display case of books about Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. He said his father found the psychology of Hitler very interesting. He was completely oblivious to the fact that his grandparents were almost certainly Nazi scientists brought over after the war and pardoned due to Operation Paperclip, and his family's legacy jewelry store was built from gold stolen from Holocaust victims. Obviously, I have no way to prove any of this. If I did, I would have already gone public with it. Story 70. My minister father-in-law cheated on his wife with a church member and also with a prostitute. My mother-in-law told me this, and I cannot tell anyone about it. Story 71. I went wakeboarding and asked a family member to keep my phone. The power key went crazy while in the handbag, so I decided to switch the phone off until I could get home to fix it. I asked my uncle if he had an old phone he was not using. He gave me an old iPhone from the drawer. I found messages on the iPhone about setting up a swap with another swinger couple. One of the messages was thanking the other couple for a picture their daughter had drawn for them. The same picture was on the fridge, which was enough proof for me. I decided to wipe the phone and keep my mouth shut. It is not my business what they do. Story 72. My ex pushed me to the ground so hard that I had a huge bruise on the side of my hip for a long time. He also pushed me out of his way during an argument when I was pregnant. Also, when I was pregnant, he got mad at another driver, rushed into an intersection, and turned the car sideways in the middle of the intersection to block the other driver. I was facing where the other driver would have hit if there had been a collision. I have never mentioned these incidents to anyone, not even my therapist. He has worked on his anger issues and is no longer physically violent. But I won't tell anyone about the past other than you, my Reddit friends. Story 73. A man I considered a friend at work and from college told my boss something that did not help me avoid getting fired. He used to go out for lunch and have sex with one of the secretaries. Over the years, I often wanted to anonymously inform his wife. Story 74. I grew up with a girl whose boyfriend drove drunk, killing himself and 3 others in the early morning hours. I did not know about his passing, and that day I saw him on a dating app where we matched. They were still together, and I have consoled her over his death out of shame. Story 75. One of my high school teachers came to my metal band show, got me drunk and high, smoked cigarettes with me, and made sexual advances throughout the night when I was 16. Some went quite too far. Not statutory rape, but severely illegal. At the time, it was just rumors. I shut them down myself. After that incident, she started changing my grades to better than they were. I didn't know why then. I still don't. Guilt? Blackmail? Something like that. Caused me serious issues feeling okay at school, and sometimes I couldn't go. I didn't really know why. I just couldn't. I ended up failing by the smallest margin and got my GED. A couple of years after high school, the administration that failed me called to ask again whether those rumors were true. I lied very well to protect her. I didn't really know why. I was scared of more consequences and, for some reason, didn't want to cause her grief. When I reached her age, I had already been going through a really hard time, largely due to failing out of high school. It was a long story involving an abusive, neglectful family. By then, I was still working myself to exhaustion trying to rebuild, but my reputation had basically sunk after that incident and never recovered. By the time I was her age, I had basically forgotten about it or just shoved it away. Too busy with my difficult life and gaslit into believing it was all my fault. I barely looked at anything other than myself being inadequate and failing at life, until I heard she was diagnosed with terminal cancer and didn't have long to live. At the age she was when she did it. Then I thought about it again for the first time in years, and it all made sense. I realized I would have to be a monster to consciously do to a 16-year-old what she did to me. The age gap seemed tremendous when I was on her end of it. Floored me. That incident was the first domino in ruining my life. People treating me like absolute garbage, like trash, like an object, and abused endlessly. She died without me saying anything, and her family and friends regarded her as nearly saintly. I never told anyone until recently, just a few close people. My girlfriend's family, since mine is destroyed now. But yes, speaking out would only hurt the surviving members of her community. My family already knows and doesn't care. They gave up on me anyway. So, Story 76. My former best friend abused her children. Her oldest is writing a book, and I read the 10 chapters she has written. I was sobbing by the end. I had no idea. Things she told me in jest, like her daughters putting a dress on their brother, were actually her way of humiliating him, beating him, and calling him a sissy. The duct tape incident was when she taped his hands together because he was playing with a toy that annoyed her. The time she took the kids for a special overnight trip, she brought them while she played inappropriate games in the next bed. She has no idea that I know. She is a councilwoman in our hometown, and I know she depends on that income. If anyone found out, she would be destroyed. Story 77. I know a child who believes the man married to his mother is his biological father. His biological father had a one-night stand and then disappeared. Story 78. My ex-best friend was a nurse, very reputable. Deep down, he is evil. We stopped being friends for many reasons. One thing he used to do as a nurse was record things of patients, naked, and send them to me as if it were funny. I called him out one day and said it wasn't funny, and I didn't appreciate it. It was sickening to see such vulnerable people photographed and made fun of by their nurse secretly. These were always sent through a messaging app, so I have no evidence. Story 79. Found an old friend's father's Reddit filled with comments flirting with girls, some underage, all sharing the same aesthetic as me and another friend who often visited her house. The comments included statements about leaving his wife for these girls and explicit details. It was really disturbing. Story 80. A lot of people I knew in their 30s and 40s, including business owners, executive-level managers, community leaders, and even a retired detective, come to mind. They were all physically dependent on opioids and regularly indulged in everything from cocaine to bars. A few used Subutex, buying prescriptions to keep their use of such medications private, in order to maintain some control over their usage. They would binge for periods and use buprenorphine to take breaks, preventing their habit from becoming unmanageable. Working from home or being your own boss makes such a lifestyle possible while still performing duties in a satisfactory and dependable manner. The key is not to mess that part up. If you can manage that, you'd be amazed at how easy it is for those around you to be completely fooled and even subconsciously go out of their way to ignore signs when you slip up, such as looking a little off or missing a meeting. As long as you maintain being perceived as valuable and essential, you'd be surprised how willing people are to turn a blind eye when warning signs inevitably occur from time to time. I speak in the past tense because I ended those relationships years ago and relocated halfway across the country. I have no idea what any of them are up to nowadays, though I suspect not much has changed since most had already been struggling for years when I still knew them. Lastly, with most of them, I sincerely doubt that the people in their lives, friends, associates, spouses, neighbors, subordinates, would ever allow themselves to believe that person was struggling with addiction if confronted with the scenario. I promise you, there is at least one person in your own circle who has been leading that kind of double life. I'm not saying it's easy, but under the right circumstances and with enough determination, it is possible to pull off. Story 81. It is not a secret because I went to the police who never did anything. My aunt and grandmother confronted a dog kennel and accused them of selling their dogs. The kennel said my grandmother's dogs had parvovirus and were put down. They even involved the news. My grandmother and uncle killed 12 dogs in a homemade gas chamber. 12 dogs and at least 20 cats are buried on that property. They followed me around, screaming that my grandfather never molested me and that I lied to put him in prison. My sister has a book about her life in foster care coming out. I will tell the truth about those people and will not back down. I confronted my grandmother about how terrible a person she was, and I am glad I stood by my beliefs. Story 82. When I worked at Papa John's Pizza during high school, my manager was in police training. He was in his late 20s and was cheating on his wife with a 16-year-old in-store worker. It was not a secret. He told me he was planning to divorce his wife as soon as he got his badge because he believed then a judge would give him everything, including total custody of their children. Would statutory rape have damaged his career as a police officer? Knowing Dallas police officers, I doubt it. Story 83. I had a year-long affair with an older married woman. It was her first time with another woman, and I am younger than both of her children. She stopped responding to me and broke my heart. Coming clean to her husband of 37 years about the nature of our relationship when I spent time at their house every day would cause serious damage. But I still love her and do not want to hurt her. Story 84. Not a very disturbing or fascinating story, but my ex-best friend's boyfriend is extremely homophobic and racist. After years of dating, she found a very large brown dildo he had hidden away. I personally don't think it would ruin his life because it is not a big deal in my opinion, but he certainly would think it would ruin him. If he knew she knew, he would absolutely lose control and probably have a meltdown. I told her to never tell him. Admittedly, it gives me satisfaction to know he has that secret only because he is a terrible person, but regardless, it is not my or her or anyone else's business because again, who cares if that is your preference? It definitely explains a lot about his behavior and projection. Story 85. I worked at a video game retailer over 10 years ago. One of our regular customers was in a terrible car accident with his wife and 2 children. His wife died, he was permanently paralyzed, and the children were okay. He had no idea his wife was cheating on him with several of his close friends, and nobody ever told him. He still speaks about her fondly, not knowing she was unfaithful to him and their children. Story 86. A friend's wife was unfaithful. She tried to hit on me when I was staying over once. At 3 a.m., she climbed into my bed naked and started to touch me, which woke me up. Shocked, I jumped out and told her to leave. The next day, she told me she had been having affairs with men in the neighborhood regularly, mainly the husbands of her friends. My good friend was unaware of his wife's actions, and I did not want to tell him. I left a day earlier to avoid the situation. They divorced a year later. Story 87. Someone on my wife's side killed a girl when he was 12. He served time in juvenile detention and now leads a normal life. His spouse and children do not know this secret. Story 88. I know a man in our extended friend group who regularly cheats on his wife when he goes on work events. They have 2 children, and he pretends to be the perfect father. It is nauseating. He does not know that I am aware. The person he cheats with is a friend of a friend, and most of his coworkers know as well. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.